Hello, and welcome back to the Maybe I Can podcast. I'm your host, Debbie Weiss, and thank you as always for joining me. It means the world to me to be able to share what's going on in my life that possibly you can relate to. And today we're going to continue our series on these new sprinkles that I am adding to my newest book, which is The Sprinkle Effect for Family Caregivers. But these concepts, these sprinkles, they're not just for family caregivers. And as you'll see today, I do have some caregiving examples, but I also have some non-caregiving examples. These are qualities that all of us in life really need to embrace. And then once we do, it makes a difference. And when I was getting ready, preparing for this week's episode, let me just tell you that the sprinkle we're going to discuss today is a sprinkle of surrender, kind of that freedom of letting go and what happens when we stop trying to control everything, right? And I thought, oh my goodness, this is one that is so hard for me. And then I realized that's what I said last week about boundaries. And that's okay. These are all things that, for me, I can say is still a work in progress. And I think that it will always be, right? And the great thing is that it's something now that we're talking about, that I've become aware of within myself. And I'm hoping that this episode will help you do the same. Why does surrender feel so uncomfortable? I think surrender is one of the most misunderstood words. And honestly, I am a culprit of being one of those people who completely misunderstood it. What did I think? When you say surrender, it sounds like you're giving up, that you're weak, and you're defeated and basically just accepting failure. And that doesn't feel good, right? But it's not about giving up. It really is about finally releasing what was never yours to control. And I think being a recovering control freak, that is a pretty hard concept or idea to swallow. And over again, this lesson has showed up in my life. And my first story, I guess, that I want to share with you when it comes to surrender is a caregiving story. And if you've been listening for a long time, you know that I'm a widow. My husband, Gary, passed away now. It's been 3.5 years. And he did die from a terminal blood cancer. But during the 6 months between when he was diagnosed and when he died, cancer was not the hardest part of his journey or my journey. It was his struggle with mental illness. And leading up to that terminal cancer diagnosis, I've got to backtrack a little bit to have it all make sense. Gary worked with me for 20 years at my insurance agency since I started. We were in it together. And I noticed that something started changing. He was not himself. He was not fun anymore. He always seemed to be down. He had a lot of anxiety. He some days couldn't make it to the office, and if he did, he couldn't come inside. And when he was inside, he would hide in a closet, basically, and be sleeping in a chair. And in that time, all I did was try and figure out what's wrong with him. How can I help him? I would make doctor's appointments, tell him the doctor's appointment, tell him that morning, and he wouldn't get out of bed and go. And I would then have to call, apologize because he was either a no-show that I didn't know he wasn't going, or I was canceling at the last minute and then trying to reschedule. And this wasn't just with one doctor. This was with many doctors because he did have a lot of things going on, physical illnesses prior to the terminal cancer diagnosis. So a lot of different doctors were involved. And I was trying to get him to go to therapy, and he wouldn't do that. Some days I couldn't get him out of bed. I would go to my office because by this point he just stopped working. He couldn't handle it mentally and emotionally, couldn't handle working. And so my older son was home at the time, and he also struggles with mental illness. So he's very tuned to what to look for and what was happening. And he would call me because he would be at home. My husband would be at home. I would be at the office. And he would call me and say, it's 2 o'clock and Dad's still in bed. And I tried to get him out of bed and I couldn't. He yelled at me. And this went on for months and months. And I tried to reach out. I was just searching for an answer, always trying to get him to do things. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't. I couldn't get him to do things. I thought if I encouraged him enough, if I loved him enough, if I pushed him enough, maybe I could change the outcome. And then I realized at a certain point, there is absolutely nothing that I can do. Now, here's where I say that I was and still am on this journey. I couldn't help myself from continuing to try. I think what I realized at a certain point was I could set the things up. I couldn't make him do anything. Eventually, what wound up happening was that my son, Sam, to me, Dad needs help and you have to call 911 and we have to get him into a mental hospital. And a few years earlier, this had happened with Sam. And it was a terrible situation. Day when the police, the ambulance, the emergency responders came and they had to forcefully take Sam away. Sam knew what this was like. And he also knew how he was helped, and he wanted the same for his father. Eventually, we did have to do the same thing and have Gary taken away, and not willingly. It was a terrible situation. I realized I can't control what Gary does. I couldn't control how he behaved, how he responded. And it was tough because all I wanted was to be able to fix things. I wanted to make things better for him. And somewhere along the way, I did realize I've got to give this up because it's not my life. I can't control his choices. I can do whatever I can to help. It's like, what is that? You bring water to a horse, but you can't have them drink. You know what I'm saying, right? So I just also want to share another story similar with my son, Sam, that, as I said, he does also suffer from mental illness. And when he was younger, not that I could control things, but I kind of could, right? Because when he was younger, I kind of could make him go to doctor's appointments. I made him go to therapy. I tried to affect how he appeared physically, because there was a time when he didn't really care about his appearance and how he was presenting himself. But as he got older, now he's 25, I can't control those things anymore. I used to basically stand there and give him his medication and watch him take it. Well, I can't do that anymore. One, I'm not here most of the time when he's taking his medication. I have to say that I found that if I leave it out for him, there's more of a chance that he will take it. Some days I come home and it's gone, but then I'll find the pills in a baggie somewhere. He wasn't ready to take it because he hadn't eaten. and he was going to wait until he had eaten, and then he forgot because he has ADHD too. And I can't force him. I've tried many times to have him use the tools that we all have, just talking to, and I do it all the time, and just ask her to set me a reminder. But he just doesn't do that. And I can't control that. I can't control whether or not he's taking his medication. With the therapy, I forced him to go to the therapy. And what I basically found out, the therapist contacted me and said, you know what? He comes, he has nothing to say, or I think he's not really telling me the truth. And it basically wasn't worth it because I was forcing him. I was trying to control him. And once again, I couldn't. And that was another heartbreaking lesson in surrender. I love him so, so much, but it doesn't mean that I can control him. I can't control the outcome, especially now that he's an adult. And it's really hard to learn the difference between supporting someone and actually controlling someone. And that trying to control what you really can't, it's exhausting, right? I mean, you become frustrated. Oh my goodness, how frustrated have I been at both Gary and Sam because they're not doing what I, told them to do, or an appointment that they were supposed to go to. And here I was putting in all this effort and I was doing everything for them. All they had to do was show up, and they couldn't even do that. And I was constantly frustrated. I resented them for not doing what in my mind they were supposed to do, that I was handing them on a silver platter. So I did become resentful, and I was exhausted. You're on this hamster wheel, making the appointments, figuring everything out with the medicine, with all the things, and then they don't show up at an appointment, and then going through that cycle of having to then cancel and reschedule, and me worrying, are they awake? Are they going to show up when they're supposed to show up? All the things. It's exhausting. And that is an addition to my regular life, right? This is one of the reasons why when we are caregivers, we are constantly exhausted. It's exhausting trying to control everything. And I think that this is one of the hardest truths in life, that caring deeply about something or someone does not mean you can control them or the situation. And so what surrender actually means is accepting the reality. I mean, this is what it is. If he wants to stay in bed, I can't make him get up. I have to release control. It's surrendering that grip, that tight grip that you're walking around with all the time. Surrender is not giving up. It's not abandoning hope or becoming passive. It really is just loosening your grip. Think of that visual, because it's exactly how it felt when I was trying to control everyone and everything and all the situations, and anticipating what the next problem or the next fire is going to be, and trying to control it so that it doesn't blow up in your face. Let me give you one more personal example about surrender, and it's a very different kind of example. It has to do with weight loss. If you are new to the podcast or to me, one of my backstories is that I have struggled with my weight for my entire life, and I know I will continue to do so. But after I turned 50, I kind of had this realization that something had to change. And the first thing back then that I knew how to change was my weight because of my health. At that point, I was about 100 pounds overweight. And in the past, whenever I tried to lose weight, I put a timeline to it, right? If you've ever tried to lose weight, you know what I'm talking about. Either I want to lose 20 pounds in 3 months, or by my birthday, or by the summer, or before that wedding that you have to go to, or that party, or whatever it is, some kind of event, some milestone. And then what happens when you don't reach that milestone? You're mad at yourself, and typically you give up. And I surrendered. For the first time, I surrendered the timeline because I realized, you know what? This is really not a short-term project. I wish it was, but it's a lifelong relationship that I have with my weight. And you know what? What happens if I don't lose 20 pounds in 3 months? What if I lose 8 pounds in 3 months? Does that mean that I should give up? No. Once I surrendered that timeline, it was like, you know what? That's 8 pounds. For goodness sake, if I stayed the same, that means I didn't gain weight. That is a win. I realized there is no timeline. My life is the timeline, and I will continually be on this journey. And so I surrendered the idea that everything had to happen with my weight according to this timeline that I was forcing and trying to control the outcome. And once I surrendered that deadline, the pressure eased and the urgency softened, which kind of allowed me to relax into what I was doing, the changes that I was making. And consistency then became possible because I wasn't striving for this date. Now I'm 62 and I'll be 63 this year. So I've been at this for a dozen years and I'm still on the journey. I have lost 90 of the 100 pounds. I really needed to lose more than 100 pounds. And so where I am right now, I would love to lose 15 to 20 more pounds. And you know what? Here I am a decade later. And if I hadn't surrendered that timeline, I'm sure that I wouldn't be 90 pounds thinner at this point because I would have thought to myself, as I had many times in the past, if I didn't hit the mark on that timeline, I would tell myself, what's wrong with you? You have no willpower. You can't do it. Something's wrong with my body. It doesn't lose weight fast enough. And I would have given up. The moment that I surrendered and I stopped trying to force the timeline was the moment I really found more peace in the whole weight loss journey. I surrendered. And I have to say, boy, does that feel good. So how does this show up for all of us? Maybe you don't relate to any of those stories. I get it. Well, when we try to control other people, and maybe you've tried to control other people in a different way than I have. Those are only a few of the examples. I know that there are millions of other ways that I've tried to control people and situations. But when we try to control people, we try to control their choices or their healing like I was. And when we try to control timing, typically we want things right away. And we try to control outcomes because we need certainty, right? We try to control life itself. We resist reality. Sometimes our suffering comes less from what's happening and more from our resistance to what's happening. So what does surrender look like in real life? Well, surrender, when we're surrendering that control over people, we become supportive without being controlling. With our goals, it's showing up without demanding instant results and giving up. With uncertainty, we surrender that we're going to move forward without any guarantees of what's to come. And with timing, we're trusting steady progress and surrendering that timeline. If you've been listening all year, back in January or really in December, people start talking about what is my word of the year, something that is going to guide you through the current year. And the word that I picked for 2026 is steady. Steady means I'm not forcing anything. I am not panicking, not gripping so tightly, and just trusting the timing. Something about steady, it feels like surrender in motion. And I love that. So now it's your turn. Ask yourself, what am I trying to control? Is this actually mine to carry? Am I supporting or am I gripping? And what would loosing my grip look like? We need to reflect on those questions and be honest with ourselves, because sometimes the knee-jerk reaction could be, well, I don't do that. I'm not trying to control anyone or anything, because it really does have a negative connotation, but I don't think it is negative. I think so many of us do that because we want to help. We want certainty in our lives. And so this is just part of being human. So my challenge for you this week is to ask yourself, what is one thing that I'm gripping too tightly right now? And then what would happen if I loosened my grip just a little? Some of the hardest peace I've ever found came when I finally accepted that I could not fix everything. And that doesn't mean I stopped loving. It means I stopped carrying responsibility for things that were never mine to control in the first place. It isn't easy. I want you to remember, surrender is not letting go of love. It is letting go of the illusion of control. Make sure to DM me at debbie.r.weiss on Instagram, or send me an email at debbie@debbierweiss.com. I'd love to hear what your answers to these questions are, what you relate to in this episode, where you're going to surrender. Make sure to reach out. And thank you so much for joining me today. And I can't wait to see you next week.